Hello and welcome back. Our final topic in the Science 10 biology booklet is plants. And today we are going to go through the specialized systems inside of plants and what they do, and the functions of the cells and tissues that make up the plant. In plants, there are two systems. We have the shoot system, which is going to be everything above ground. So anything that you see above the ground for a plant. The stem, the leaves, the buds, the flowers, the fruits. This also includes things called tubers, like a potato, which is actually a sideways stem, even though that's below the ground. But that's a little bit more for botany than anything else. So here's our plant. Imagine we have a dividing line here. This is our ground level. Everything below the ground is going to be our root system. So the shoot system is above the ground, and our root system is everything underground. These two systems are made of tissues. Tissues are specially made for different activities. These tissues are made of specially made cells, which help them function as they are made to. So their level of organization here is we have a bunch of cells that make up a tissue. All of those tissues together make up the systems for these plants. These are some types of tissues that you would find in plant systems. The epidermis tissue, sometimes this is referred to as dermal tissue, is the outer layer that is one cell thick and responsible for the exchange of materials like carbon dioxide, water, and oxygen into and out of the plant. Remember, it's the outer layer, and its whole job is to exchange materials, also to prevent some materials from coming in. Here is a cross-section of this plant stem. The epidermal tissue, or the dermal tissue, epidermis, is this outside layer. Here are a bunch of different dermal tissue cells. We have a couple of different specialized cells. These are just your regular dermal tissue cells. This one here is called a trichome. It's kind of like a hair cell. It helps the plant to sense the environment, and it also acts as a layer of defense. And we have our guard cells. These are another specialized form of cell that are going to allow the exchange of gases. More on that in a bit. And we have this non-living layer called the cuticle, which is on top here. The epidermal tissue is just the outside. This yellow bit here is a different sort of tissue. This yellow bit here, so I'll switch to yellow. This is a different tissue. That's the highlighter. 1 second. This is called ground tissue. A different type of tissue. One thing I want to look at briefly here is our cuticle. The cuticle here is a non-living wax layer that keeps invaders out and water in. That's on the outside. It's secreted by the epidermis. Guard cells are a specialized type of cell in the epidermal tissue. It is a specialized cell type. It is still from the epidermis. Under leaves, there are specific cells called guard cells that form tiny pores called stomata. These pores are for gas exchange. The pore is the hole in the epidermis. If we look back at this diagram in the top right, Here are the guard cells. This is the pore through which gases are traveling. This is a top-down view of the pore. We have the stomata, which is this pore itself, and then we have the two guard cells, which are going to open and close the pore to allow gases to move in and out. Roots. For a plant, roots are responsible for absorption of water. This means that they must have a large surface area exposed to the soil so that the greatest amount of water is absorbed. If we take a look at this diagram here, in the epidermis here, so still a type of epidermal cell, we have specialized root hairs. These root hairs stretch out into the soil and greatly increase the surface area of the epidermis. So a root hairs are specialized dermal cells that greatly increase surface area. This is going to allow for the maximum possible absorption of water into the roots. Once water's entered, then you need some sort of tissue to move it around the plant. That's going to bring us to vascular tissue. The word vascular here refers to vessels. It is used to carry fluids. We have two types of vascular tissue. We have xylem. I'll do blue for xylem. And phloem, which I will do green for. In a tree, now lots of plants, all vascular plants, have xylem and phloem. Interestingly enough, not all plants, but for Science 10, most plants that you imagine have vascular tissue, xylem and phloem. If you're thinking about like a tree, then the xylem is going to be the wood part and the phloem is on the outside. It's the bark part. Both are just before the bark. Both are responsible for transporting materials throughout the plant. The xylem, which is a fun word, not very many words that start with X and in the English language. The xylem moves water. The xylem moves water and dissolved minerals from the roots up to the stems and to the leaves where it is used in photosynthesis. So it moves the water from the roots up. As the xylem cells mature, they fuse together, forming one long tube, and the cells die, leaving non-living cell walls attached together like a long straw. Imagine stacking a bunch of paper towel rolls, one on top of the other, and taping them together to form one long tube. That's like the xylem. One thing I want to highlight here is that they die. Xylem is made of dead cells. Xylem is made of dead cells. If you're taking a look at this diagram here, oops, I wanted to have the laser pointer here. The xylem here is closer to the middle and the phloem is on the outside. So if you're ever given a diagram, the xylem is going to be closer to the center. And the phloem is going to be closer to the outside. There is another tissue or cell type here called the cambium, which is the kind of the stem cells in a sense. It's the cells that specialize into either xylem or phloem. That's a little bit beyond what you need to know. But you should know what the phloem is. The phloem, spelt with a PH, transports sucrose and other dissolved sugars from the leaves to other parts of the plant. The phloem is going to be made of living cells. And it's going to transport the sugars from the leaves to the other parts. I don't know why that line dropped off so weird here. Transported sugars are stored as starch in various parts of the plant. If you can think of other plants, of a bunch of different plants, you can probably think of examples of where it's stored in different plants. If it's stored in the roots, a good example would be a root vegetable like a carrot. If it's stored in the stems, you might think like sugar cane. If it's stored in the leaves, you might think like spinach or something that you eat the leaves of. Starch can also be stored in the seeds, like if you eat sunflower seeds. It could be stored in the fruits, like an apple, or it could be stored in the flowers, like broccoli or cauliflower. Basically, the starch can be stored in all parts of the plant, depending on the species of plant that you're looking at. Here's a good diagram. This is the xylem vessel. It's going to transport water and minerals. It is full of dead cells. I just want you to put that note there. These blue cells here are dead, hollow cells. Here's our phloem on this side. These are living cells. And they are going to be transporting food. And there's two-way flow instead of one-way flow. Xylem's going to be going from the roots up to the shoots. And this is going to be going wherever the plant needs the sugar to go, because all of those cells are going to need the sugar that's made in the leaves. The reason that things can move through the plant is because water has specific properties called cohesion and adhesion. These are properties of water. And these properties allow the particles of water to move through the plant. Cohesion, think like co-worker or cohort, means that water likes to stick to itself. Water sticks to itself. Adhesion, think additional, something else, adding on, is that water likes to stick to other things. These two properties of water help move water through the plant. In this picture here, you see that the water molecules stick together. That's cohesion. But they also stick to the walls of the xylem. That's adhesion. The method of sticking is a type of intermolecular force called a hydrogen bond, but that's not something that you need to get into unless you choose to take Chem 20 after this course. Here's some review questions. I want you to try them, pause the video, and then I'm going to go through them. All right, roots. The best definition here is that roots are underground. Roots, the root system is underground. Long tubes that carry water and sugar from the leaves to the rest of the plant. You're going from the leaves and you're carrying both water and sugar. That is phloem. The shoot system is everything above ground. So roots cannot be part of the shoot system because they are below ground. This layer of the epidermis is a waxy substance that protects the plant. That is the cuticle. I would actually get rid of the word tissue here because it's not actually made of cells. It's a wax layer, but the cuticle is the waxy substance. This means that water likes to stick to itself. That is cohesion. Think co-worker or cooperation, working together. Water molecules working together, sticking together. All right. Now we're going to zoom in on the xylem and phloem, and we're going to talk about how water and sugar move around the plant. Photosynthesis, that reaction, that wonderful reaction that makes oxygen and glucose, requires water, which is transported up the plant by the xylem. Sugar is a product of photosynthesis, and thus there is lots of it in the leaves. The leaves is where the majority of photosynthesis occurs. And it is transported by the phloem. Water moves along a concentration gradient from the roots, where the concentration is high, to the leaves, where the concentration is low. Remember that if you are going along a concentration gradient, that this is passive. You're going along the concentration gradient. Sugar does the same, moving from the leaves to the rest of the plant where it is stored. Not all water is used in photosynthesis. Some of it is lost through the leaves through a process called transpiration. Transpiration is the evaporation of water from the leaves. Stomata, which are those pores that we talked about earlier, allow water to exit the leaf. They also allow carbon dioxide and water to enter and exit the leaf. So, now that's confusing. They allow water to exit the leaf, but you'll also allow things like carbon dioxide and, you know what, I'm going to cross out water here. Yes, water vapor could enter, but more important here would be oxygen. They're going to allow carbon dioxide and oxygen gas to enter and exit the leaf. As water exits the leaf, you're going to lower the concentration in the leaf. So when you evaporate water from the leaf, you will lower the concentration of the water there. Because of this concentration gradient, the roots will take up water and it will travel up to the leaves. Something else that helps the movement of water is the high concentration in the cells of the roots due to active transport. To be very specific, because I'm misreading it, the high concentration of nutrients. The high concentration of nutrients in the cells of the roots. The nutrients here are our solutes. If you have a high concentration of solute inside the roots, that means you have a low concentration of water. This concentration gradient will cause water to move because of osmosis. All of a sudden, there is a lower concentration of water inside the roots because of the higher concentration of solute. Then, due to osmosis, water is drawn into the root cells, causing there to be a higher concentration of water in the roots compared to the leaves, which means that it will then draw up through the plant. So this whole collection here that's described here, the active transport of nutrients into the root cells, and then that causing water to move by osmosis. This is known as root pressure. There are two forces that will cause movement of water through the xylem. Those two forces are transpiration and root pressure. Transpiration is going to lower the concentration of water in the leaves, and root pressure is going to raise the concentration of water in the roots. These two forces combined, I realize my face is in the way there. These two forces combined will cause there to be a concentration gradient between the roots in the leaves, and water will be drawn up through the plant. Here's a diagram here that shows a lot of different things happening. Water is absorbed through the roots and carried through the stem to the rest of the plant. A plant's roots replace water lost during transpiration. Excess sugar is stored as starch in the roots. This will also create a concentration gradient. This causes water to move up the plant. The water will move into the leaves where it is used for photosynthesis. Some of the water is not used for photosynthesis, and it will exit the leaves via transpiration, which will pull more water up through the plant. Chlorophyll, which again is inside those chloroplasts in the plant cells, traps light energy and harnesses it to fix carbon dioxide into glucose and combine it with water. Oxygen is then released as a byproduct. We're going to label a picture here. We're going to draw the flow of nutrients and water, and we're going to label where diffusion and osmosis may occur. Okay, this is going to be an important diagram. On this side, on the left, we're going to talk about movement of water. And on the right, we're going to talk about movement of glucose. Okay, there are going to be a couple different nutrients that will move as well in this diagram. First of all, our source of water is going to be from the roots. Water enters roots by osmosis. Then water travels up the stem because of diffusion. Water travels up the stem from a high concentration to a low concentration. I'm going to label down here, in the roots, we have a high concentration of water. Now, water is going to go up into the leaves. Some of the water is going to leave by transpiration. Some water exits leaves by transpiration. This will lower the concentration of water. If you lower the water concentration in the leaves, that is going to draw more water into the roots to replace that water that is lost. Now, the reason that the water enters the roots by osmosis here is because the water outside of the soil or outside of the roots is hypotonic, or the solution out here is hypotonic, meaning that there is a higher concentration of water here than inside the roots because the roots are full of solutes. We're going to have active transportation of minerals into roots and other nutrients into roots. This is going to create root pressure. By lowering water, I'm going to write as H2O, concentration in the roots. That's going to draw more water into the roots by osmosis. This piece here takes energy. The rest of this was passive. But this piece here takes energy. It's a weird circle. Water is traveling up the stem. Some water is used for photosynthesis. Is used for photosynthesis. Now, when photosynthesis happens, we also need carbon dioxide to enter for photosynthesis. So if photosynthesis is occurring right here, where I make this green circle, we also need to have CO2. I'll make it not blue. We'll go purple for CO2. We need carbon dioxide gas to enter the stomata for photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is going to create oxygen, which will leave. Oxygen gas leaves the leaves from the photosynthesis. Which I didn't have enough space, so I'm just going to leave it at photosyn. The product of photosynthesis is going to be glucose, which will go to the rest of the plant. So I'm going to say here, glucose travels through the phloem to the rest of the plant. The one more thing I'm going to add here is that when we say that the water travels up the stem from high concentration to low concentration, we're going to add here through the xylem. The xylem tissue will be the thing that the water is traveling through. This here, I'll just take my picture off. This here is a pretty good summary of the transport of water and other nutrients throughout the plant. I know my writing is not the cleanest, but a diagram of this sort would be a good thing for you to know how to draw. It doesn't have to be a pretty diagram of a tree, but to be able to label a diagram or describe the process of water moving from the soil out of the plants through transpiration would be good. Gas exchange. Water is not the only nutrient that a plant needs. I mean, we put carbon dioxide and oxygen on here for a reason, because those are required for two processes. Photosynthesis requires a gas, as does cellular respiration. Photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplasts, mostly of leaf cells. That's where you're going to find the most chloroplasts, because they're going to have the most sunlight. Here's your photosynthesis reaction. And I always like to balance chemical reactions, so we have 6 carbon dioxides plus 6 waters makes 1 glucose and 6 oxygen. This requires sunlight energy. That's why we have a picture of the sun above this arrow. Is we're going to write here, this requires sunlight energy. Another way of thinking of this reaction is that sunlight is on the, or energy is on the reactant side of the photosynthesis reaction. Cellular respiration is quite the opposite of photosynthesis. It occurs in the mitochondria of all plant cells. Every plant cell needs energy. And this doesn't require sunlight in order to take place. It just requires glucose and a mitochondria and oxygen. Glucose and oxygen are going to be reacted to form carbon dioxide and water and energy. And so energy in cellular respiration will be on the product side. These two reactions are inverse of each other, where we have we just reverse the reaction basically, except instead of making sunlight energy, you're making ATP cellular energy. From these reactions, we can see that plants need both photosynthesis and cellular respiration carry out their life processes. By contrast, animals do not need to make their own food, and we don't use carbon dioxide for our life processes. We only do cellular respiration. For plants, photosynthesis can only happen during the day when there's sunlight, but cellular respiration can happen in the dark and at other times. It says can happen in the dark, so I want you to say can happen at any time. The plant's going to need energy all of the time, and when that cellular respiration is happening in the dark, any excess carbon dioxide that's produced is released. Any carbon dioxide produced is released. So plants can still release carbon dioxide. They just end up making a larger amount of oxygen than the carbon dioxide they release. Recall from earlier in the lesson that the guard cells form a pore called a stomata. And that allows for gas exchange to happen easily. The guard cells control when the stomata are open. What would be the issue of having the stomata open all the time? Well, the plant would constantly be losing the gases that it wants, as well as losing water. The plant would constantly lose water and desirable gases. The guard cells open by taking in water. The guard cells shrink when the guard cells take in water, they expand. They have a cell wall that is going to be thicker on the inside near the pore, which means this part expands faster, and they kind of make this bean shape that opens up the stomata. What I want you to know here is that guard cells open by taking in water through osmosis. These guard cells are still plant cells, so they have chloroplasts in them. They're in the leaves, so they can still do photosynthesis, but it's this central vacuole that ends up storing the water that allows them to open or close. Because you have to control water loss, due to potential water loss, the stomata have to be controlled. All right, we're going to look at a couple different situations, and we would decide whether or not the stomata would need to be open or closed. If you have a high humidity environment, or if your humidity is high, you would open your stomata because you're not worried about losing water. Humidity is how much water is in the atmosphere. If the humidity is low, then you would probably want to close your stomata because you don't want to lose water when it's dry outside. If the carbon dioxide concentration is high, then you would want to open your stomata to allow carbon dioxide to move in. Remember, plants want more carbon dioxide to a certain level in order to carry out photosynthesis. If the carbon dioxide level is low, however, then they would close their stomata because they don't want to lose any carbon dioxide that they have gathered. When it's sunny outside, then the stomata would open to allow carbon dioxide to come in and do photosynthesis. If it's not sunny outside, then depending on the situation, they might also be open because you'll want to release the carbon dioxide that you're making from respiration overnight. This one really is dependent on the situation. Really what I want you to know is that more photosynthesis than cellular respiration occurs in the daytime. In the daytime, we have more photosynthesis than cell resp. And if we have more photosynthesis than cell resp in the daytime, then we want more carbon dioxide in and we'll be pumping oxygen out. But during the dark, you're going to have no photosynthesis, which I'll just abbreviate as no photo, and we're going to have only cell resp. And if you only have cellular respiration, then your carbon dioxide isn't doing anything for you. And carbon dioxide is actually acidic, so the plant's going to get rid of the carbon dioxide that it can't use in photosynthesis because it's dark outside. So it will push carbon dioxide out when it's dark, and it will bring oxygen in. Okay, something similar to a stomata, except in the stem rather than the leaves, is something called a lenticel. This is a picture of lenticels. Lenticels act like stomata and are another pathway for gas exchange. They are blisters or slashes on the stems of trees. Here's a bunch of lenticels from two different plants. They're going to let gases go in and out, but they're slightly different. It's in the stem. Here's some practice questions. Take a look at them, pause the video, try them out. Okay, transpiration. Transpiration is due to evaporation of water through stomata. That's our definition of transpiration. A solution outside the cell that is hypotonic to the cell contents will cause what to happen? Okay, remember, hypotonic means that it has a lower solute concentration. lower solute and a higher solvent. So a outside environment that is hypotonic has more solvent, so the water will move into the cell. This is how root pressure works, where the soil is hypotonic to the root, so water moves from the soil to the root. Photosynthesis must occur during the day, which means cellular respiration mostly occurs at night. It also happens during the day because you will need energy at other times too. The products of photosynthesis are glucose and oxygen. What causes stomata to open? Okay, so stomata will open if there is lots of water in the vacuole in the guard cell. You need to have water in the vacuole in the guard cell in order to open the stomata. Here's our last part of plants, phototropism and gravitropism. If you think back to the first lesson in the biology unit, we talked about how there were 7 characteristics of all living things. Movement was one of those, growth was one of those, and sense was one of those. This is related to plants' ability to move towards the things they need, like sunlight, as well as controlling their growth and sensing their environment. What things do plants need for photosynthesis? For photosynthesis, plants need sunlight. Plants need water. And plants need carbon dioxide. And where are they found? Well, carbon dioxide is going to be found in the atmosphere. Water is going to be found in the soil. And sunlight is going to be found outside. I'm just going to say out of shade. Phototropism. Tropism refers to the movement of a plant in response to a stimulus. Think about when you're hungry and then you walk by a Little Caesars pizzeria and then you smell the delicious hot and ready pizza. You will be drawn towards that smell. That is a tropism. Plants tend to grow toward the light. This is called phototropism. Oops. Stems show positive phototropism. Roots show negative phototropism. Instead of green, I'll use red for positive. Positive. Positive and negative just mean that they're going in the opposite directions. So positive phototropism means towards the light. Negative phototropism means away from the light. If you have a plant and you're growing it with a light directly above the plant will grow straight up towards the light. If you shine the light from the side, the plant will grow sideways towards the light. Or if you grow a plant in your house or your apartment and you put it next to the window, it will bend its leaves towards the window to try and get more light. The roots will go away from light, negative phototropism. Another stimulus that plants respond to is the pull of gravity. This is called gravitropism. Stems grow against the gravitational force. If you go against the force of gravity, this is negative gravitropism. So even in the absence of light, the stem will grow away from gravity. Roots, on the other hand, show positive gravitropism because they will grow in the same direction as gravity. This plant is going straight up and down. The roots grow with gravity, so the roots are going positive with gravity. Roots grow with gravity. And the stem, the shoot, shoots grow against gravity. If you tilt the plant on its side, the roots will still grow with gravity, and the stem will grow against gravity. I'll label this picture here as well, where we have our shoots grow towards the light. Shoots grow toward the light. It's a terrible terrible writing of the word toward. As the day goes on, I think my writing's getting worse. Okay. Stems in response to lights. I want you to write beside the word stem, also write the word shoots, because shoots and stems are part of the same system. Stems grow towards the light, meaning that that is a positive phototropism. Positive because it's towards the stimulus, phototropism because that's our type of stimulus. Roots grow away from the light. That is negative phototropism. Stems or shoots grow away from gravity, so that is negative phototropism. They'll grow up against gravity. And roots grow towards gravity. Oops, I said phototropism. This is gravitropism. This is gravitropism. Whereas roots have positive gravitropism towards the pole of gravity. How do we know this? Let's look at some experiments that will show how we know this. Charles Darwin, who is famous for his work on the origin of species and the theory of evolution by natural selection, he and his son Francis did some experiments regarding phototropism. And he found that the tip of the shoot, I'm going to say here that the shoot tip responds to phototropic stimulus. If you shine light from the side, then the tip will grow towards the light. If you cut it off, even if you're shining light from the side, it will grow straight up and down. So the only tropism that the shoot will respond to is going to be gravitropism. If you cover the tip with a opaque cap, opaque meaning no light can go through, then it is going to grow straight up and down, similar as if you had cut it off. If you cover it with a transparent cap, it will grow as if it had nothing on there. So it's the light that causes the stimulus. And if you cover the base with an opaque shield, it still grows towards the light. So it's not anything happening down here that controls which direction the shoot grows. It's happening at the tip of the shoot. Peter Boyce and Jensen built on this, where he tried to figure out, okay, well, how does the plant know that it's growing towards the light? So here was his experiment. He cut the tip off, just like Charles Darwin did, except now he replaced it with a semi-permeable gelatin block that would allow chemicals to move from the tip to the rest of the shoot. And then he reattached it with a block of mica, which is impermeable. So this block here is semi-permeable. So it would allow some sort of chemicals to move from the tip to the rest of the shoot, whereas the block of mica is impermeable. So nothing could pass. And for this experiment, light is still coming from the side. He found that the plant grew towards the light if there was a semi-permeable block between the tip and the rest of the shoot. This means that there had to be some sort of chemical signal that moved from the tip to the rest, because this didn't happen when it was an impermeable block. So this suggested that the growth response could only be accomplished by the result of a chemical signal. Another word for a chemical signal is a hormone. F.W. Wendt built on this experiment and tried to figure out what is the specific substance responsible for initiating the phototropic response and making sure that the tip of the plant grew towards the sunlight. He isolated a chemical substance which was later called auxin. Auxin is a plant hormone. And it has the ability to initiate the physiological response. Physiological response meaning it changes how something grows or acts at the cellular level. Auxin makes cells grow longer in the shoot system. That's what it does. Auxin makes cells grow longer in the shoot system. So when the sun is overhead, the auxins get distributed evenly on all sides. When sunlight hits from a side, auxins move to the shaded side, which makes those cells grow longer and bends the shoot towards the sunlight. This bends the shoot towards the sun. This is how the phototropic response works in shoots. Gravitropism also works with auxins, but it's slightly different. Just like phototropism, gravitropism is also caused by the unequal distribution of auxin. I used purple for auxin, so I'll do the same here. In a root placed horizontally, the bottom side contains more auxin and grows less, causing the root to grow in the direction of the force of gravity. So auxin responds differently to root cells than it does to shoot cells. On the previous page, we said that auxin causes shoot cells to grow longer. Auxin causes root cells to grow shorter. Gravity is going to pull the auxins to the lower half of the stem and the root, which means that these root cells will grow shorter. This will cause the root to bend downwards, but it will cause these shoot cells to grow longer, so they will go upwards. Here's some last questions. Pause the video and give those a shot, and then I'm going to go through them. Signals that organisms respond to are called stimuli. It's an external signal that we're going to respond to. Tropisms describes what the response is. Tropisms are the response itself. A plant bends toward a light source as it grows. If it goes towards the stimulus, that is positive, and it's towards light, so this is positive phototropism. A corn seed is germinated in the dark, meaning that the seed is allowed to grow into the shoot in the root. The root grows in a downward direction. It's in the dark, so it cannot be oops, didn't mean to zoom in like that. Because it's in the dark, it's no phototropism. It has to be in response to gravity, and we're going in the same direction as gravity because we're a root system, so this would be positive gravitropism. The tip of the stem of an oat leaf plant is covered with aluminum foil. Aluminum foil does not allow light through. A light source from one side will do what? Well, if no light can go through, then there will be no effect on the stem. The phototropic response to light occurs where in the stem? Well, Charles Darwin and his son's experiment showed that it was at the tip of the stem. All right. Now let's label this. Above ground, this is our stem. Below ground, this is our root. The stem will show positive phototropism and negative gravitropism. It will grow away from gravity towards light. And the root will show negative phototropism and positive gravitropism. The root will grow towards the direction of gravity and away from the light. All right, that ends the Science 10 biology booklet. Nice work and good luck on your test.